This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans, it's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Wrestling fans have heard the term the Dusty Finish, but what exactly is it? And did Dusty Rhodes really create it? Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at how this storytelling tool started long before Dusty Rhodes began using it, whether it's a bad thing, and several examples of how it's been used and misused. Before we get started though, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. The Dusty Finish is nothing new. As we suggested in part 1 of this video, the Dusty Finish didn't begin with the American Dream. Let's look at some examples of how it's been used effectively and how it's been run into the ground with the same results as Dusty's use or overuse of the storyline tool. Jim Crockett Promotions. Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair for the United States Heavyweight Championship. This one involves Dusty and Ric Flair, who we already saw were involved in a Dusty Finish at 1985 Starrcade. However, this one wasn't booked by the American Dream, but by George Scott, often credited, and rightfully so, as one of wrestling's keenest minds for booking. On June 17, 1979, Dusty Rhodes challenged Ric Flair for the United States Championship. Wrestling legend Nature Boy Buddy Rogers was a special referee for the match, and he played a pivotal role in the match's outcome. During the bout, Flair made a move against Rogers, only for the wrestling great to slug Flair, lowering the champ. As wrestling historian Tim Hornbaker writes, the single punch sent Flair to the canvas, and Rhodes covered for a successful pin. Dusty was crowned the new United States Heavyweight Champion, and the audience went nuts in response. Officials reportedly reviewed tape of the match in the days that followed, and Flair was returned the belt due to Rogers' illegal actions. At the time, Slick Rick was transforming into a babyface after a long run as a heel, but Rhodes, who was a babyface, had the benefit of looking strong and could return any time for a rematch. This match would be just one of many between Flair and Rhodes during their two illustrious careers. The St. Louis Wrestling Club. Promoter and NWA founder Sam Muchnick's St. Louis promotion was known for its emphasis on presenting pro wrestling as a high-class event that was big on athletics and small on shenanigans. For some fans, the idea of a Dusty Finish in St. Louis was tantamount with someone breaking wind at the Sistine Chapel. Nonetheless, wrestling historian Scott Bowden's internet sleuthing discovered at least one use of the Dusty Finish, Muchnick's home base, the Kiel Auditorium. On February 6, 1981, NWA World Champion Harley Race was defending his title against Ted DiBiase when the referee was knocked to the ground. The champ then threw the future $1 Million Man over the top rope, an automatic disqualification in the National Wrestling Alliance. But that didn't stop DiBiase. Instead, the second-generation grappler delivered a belly-to-belly suplex, covering Race as the second referee counted the 1-2-3 for the apparent win and the title. According to writer Jeff Sharkey, although the first referee was knocked down, he'd seen Race throw DiBiase over the top rope. The referees conferred, and DiBiase was awarded the win, but not the title. As Sharkey notes in his account of the finish, the St. Louis crowd shared DiBiase's visible disappointment. But it was the right decision technically, and thus they respected the referee's call, especially after he was endorsed by a handshake from the challenger, who came just that close on this night. The anticipation of DiBiase being on the brink of striking gold led the fans back to the rematch at the Chuckerdome on June 12, 1981. In this instance, the Dusty Finish worked well. Fans eagerly returned for a rematch to see if DiBiase could finally defeat Race. Race prevailed in the rematch, but there was apparently little or no ill will by the fans. The American Wrestling Association. Dusty Finishes can enrage fans, as seen by our next example. Here, AWA promoter Vern Gagne's repeated use of the Dusty Finish made it obvious to fans that the AWA World Championship was never going to be around the Hulkster's waist. When Hulk Hogan entered the AWA, it didn't take long before fans were rooting for the heel wrestler, which led to promoter Vern Gagne turning Hogan babyface and capitalizing on his popularity. To many fans, the Hulkster seemed like the right choice for dethroning heel champion Nick Bockwinkel. However, according to wrestling historian Tim Hornbaker, Gagne was reluctant. Hogan wasn't a technically sound grappler in the vein of former AWA champions, and Gagne was hesitant. As a 10-time title holder himself, Gagne brought credibility to the championship, similar to what Lou Thesz did for the NWA belt, and he didn't believe punch-and-kick brawlers like Hogan were genuine enough to represent his group. This led to Gagne using the Dusty Finish to tease a Hogan title win but then to pull the rug from under the fans' feet as the decision was reversed. According to Hulk Hogan, Gagne was using the near wins to reel the fans in for a major show at the St. Paul Civic Center. Verne just wanted to build up the fans' anticipation, and when the next month came, he doubled ticket prices and flew Stanley Blackburn in from Denver, Colorado, and everybody smelled title change. As Hogan tells it, Gagne was ready to put the AWA title on him, but for a price. Verne Gagne, who had basically screwed the fans by raising the ticket prices and making them think the title was going to change hands, came to me in the dressing room that night. He said, "Here's a deal. I'm going to put the AWA belt on you tonight, but if you keep going to Japan, I want a percentage of the money you make there." Hogan had been bringing in some major bank thanks to his tours of Japan, but he wasn't going to give Gagne any of his earnings. This supposedly led to Hogan balking, and Gagne going with yet another dusty finish. As Hogan recalls it, "I said, 'No, Verne, I'm not going to do that.' He said, 'Well, you're going to win the belt tonight. Don't you think that's worth a percentage of your earnings?' That really got to me. I said, 'You know something, Verne? I'm not interested in your belt. As a matter of fact, I'm not interested in wrestling here much longer.'" Despite Verne trying to horn in on Hogan's lucrative deal in Japan, the Hulkster claims, "Basically, I was just calling his bluff. I really wanted to stay there in Minnesota. There was no end to my popularity, and it was an easy gig to wrestle a couple of weeks and make that kind of money." While the circumstances of why Gagne didn't put the AWA title on Hogan remain open to debate, a dusty finish was used to keep the title off Hogan. Hogan claims in his biography that he came up with the finish. He also insinuates that Verne Gagne was trying to get Hogan to marry his daughter Kathy as part of the deal. Whatever the case, fans watching the AWA Super Show at the St. Paul Civic Center on April 24, 1983, saw AWA President Stanley Blackburn rule that Hogan had been disqualified for throwing Bockwinkel over the top rope. According to Hogan, the last straw occurred when he learned that Verne Gagne had been manufacturing and selling Hulk Hogan merchandise. When Hogan asked him where his cut of the proceeds were, Gagne reportedly told him, "You don't get a percentage. Those are my shirts. I've got a right to sell them." As Hogan tells it, this was around the same time Vince McMahon was negotiating with him to jump to the WWF, and Gagne's tactics made Hogan's decision to go to New York very easy. The WWF, Bob Backlund versus Greg Valentine. The WWF wasn't above using the dusty finish either. On October 19, 1981, fans attending the Madison Square Garden WWF Championship title defense by Bob Backlund against Greg Valentine witnessed what appeared to be a shocking title change. The match had been raging for nearly 20 minutes when Greg Valentine lifted the champ up in an airplane spin, with Backlund inadvertently hitting the referee. However, Backlund was able to gain leverage over Valentine, sending him onto his back and covering him as the groggy referee made the 3 counts. What happened next was perplexing for fans, as the official raised Valentine's arm in victory. What had happened? Apparently, the dazed referee had mistaken Backlund for Valentine, which was understandable as both men were blondes, both men were wearing black trunks, and the referee had just been clobbered. After meeting with officials, announcer Howard Finkel informed the fans that the title was being held up pending an investigation by the New York State Athletic Commission and the WWF. While this is a variation of the dusty finish, it made for some excitement for fans in the Garden and led to a box office blowout the next month in Madison Square Garden as Backlund defeated Valentine, putting to rest any question of who the real champion was. Although this storyline was confined to Madison Square Garden, it was an effective use of the dusty finish. In Dusty's defense, while the American Dream is no longer with us, Dusty left behind the defense of his style of booking, and we here at Wrestling's Greatest Moments only feel it's fair to share the 3-time NWA World Champion's thoughts on the finish he made famous. Here's an excerpt from Dusty's memoir, Dusty, Reflections of Wrestling's American Dream, a terrific read for any wrestling fan. The dusty finish is without a doubt the biggest scam in our industry. Just what exactly is the dusty finish? The phrase was created by sheet writers and picked up by the guys in the business who read them. They say it's where the referee is knocked out, the babyface gets the pin on the heel, but it doesn't count because there's nobody there to count 1, 2, 3. So the babyface helps the ref, and in the aftermath somehow gets fizzled by the heel with a swerve of some sort. And this is my finish? Dusty's spirited defense continues on, with Rhodes making the same point other critics, as well as Dusty defenders, have made, that it didn't originate with the Dream. Sure, I may have brought it to prominence by showing it on TV back in the 80s, but my finish? That fizzling finish was around a hell of a lot longer before I was booking. I actually remember seeing a finish like that when I was a kid, and if the swerve is what makes it the Dusty finish, well then I guess the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was a Dusty finish. The problem is that Dusty ran the finish into the ground, and thanks to cable TV, and the dirt sheets to a lesser extent, fans recognized it when it happened. Fool me once, shame on you. Book a Dusty finish over and over, and it's time to tune into something else. The Dusty finish wasn't the sole reason for Jim Crockett Promotions' failure, but it certainly didn't help. Dusty finish lives on. While the Dusty finish can be overused, it continues to come into play, even today, although wise bookers know how to use it sparingly unless they want to anger fans. Like any storytelling tool, it can be effective when used with finesse. When it's not, it can lead to angry fans, which can lead to empty seats and decreases in the ratings. What do you think of the Dusty finish? Have you heard about these sketchy scenarios? Do you think the finish still has a place in wrestling? Or should it be retired due to its bad reputation? Share your thoughts in the comments section and let us know if there's any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.